Continuing our reading in the World and Thorinn by Damon Knight, Chapter 10, Section 2. Thornton crawled under a bush, untied his bundles with shaking fingers, and slept. When he awoke, it was full green dark. He was wet and cold, and the wind was shaking droplets of water from the bush onto his face. For a moment he thought himself back in the cave behind the cataract. Then he remembered and sat up, shivering. He tied his bundles around him and crawled out from under the bush. The green skylight was too faint for walking, and he climbed the nearest tree instead. From its tip, 100 ells above the ground, he could make out the clustered towers, not far off in the bend of the river. They were dark and still. As he watched, a sudden bar of gold appeared at the end of the cavern. It widened, swelled, grew paler. Then it was sweeping overhead, and as it passed, Thornton glimpsed a brown bird wheeling above, head cocked, one bright eye looking down. The skylight dazzled him, and when he could see again, the bird was gone. He followed the riverbank eastward a while, then climbed the slope and found himself in a plowed field. It had been planted to beans or some other garden vegetable, and the young shoots were coming up half covered by weeds. Nearer now, the towers were surrounded by a huddle of smaller buildings. As he approached, he could see that they were built around the trunks of young trees. They appeared to be made of withy, and sometimes the green branches of a tree peeped out to show that it was still there. Some of the curving walls were plastered with a substance like pale mud, others dabbed with bright colors in stripes and circles. Grasses and weeds were sprouting in the earth around the buildings. There were a few marks of hooves and clawed feet, but none that looked recent and none that were human. The briars were vacant, doors standing open. The 7 towers clustered in a crescent around a great courtyard overgrown with vines and grass. After the first 200 ells or so, each tower was capped with a conical roof. But from this roof sprang another, smaller tower, not from the peak of the roof, but to one side of it. And sometimes the roof of this tower, too, sprouted still another tower. Buttresses joined the towers. Some of these had windows or even balconies in them. Thornton went on into the empty courtyard. He listened. Not a sound. From the balconies overhead hung vines with yellowed leaves. There was a sweetish smell of decay in the air. Among the litter between the buildings he found several jugs and drinking vessels, a tunic of red woven cloth, curiously made with loose fastenings at the sides, a broken framework of wood with some parchment-like substance stretched over it, a mirror of polished silver in a bone frame, and a little idol or godlet made of soft cloth, with a gray button-eyed face and long naked wings like those of a wing mouse. He sprang up to the first balcony and peered within. The floor was resilient, loosely woven of cords. There were a few low carved tables, but no chairs or beds. The ceiling seemed extraordinarily high. Below it were rods that might have been perches for birds. Beyond was a maze of other rooms, gloomy even by day. Thornton found a light box on the wall, divided it into 2 compartments like his own, the moss in one compartment still feebly alight. He transferred a pinch of it to the other compartment and carried it to the next room. Then he set it down again. It made him uneasy to be surrounded by such a bubble of light with a darkness beyond it. A few moments later he turned to look behind and saw the translucent partition dully glowing. The rooms were arranged in a ring around a vast wall of the center of the tower, 30 ells across and at least 200 deep. Dim chinks of light far up illuminated it. The silence was murmurous. Thornton retreated into the rooms again. Litter was everywhere, but no more than you would expect to find in any household. Clothing, scraps of this and that, things that might have been children's toys carved of wood. In closets and chests he found more clothing, all with the same curious side fastenings, hanging neatly or carefully folded. Also cabinets full of curious little wooden and bone implements, of whose use he had no notion. The feeling was strong on him that the people who lived here had only gone away for a while, but where could they have gone? That is the end of section 2.